In 1963, the old man who ran the Prince Hall Lodge on a corner in the Hill District of Pittsburgh could tell you inside of 5 minutes whether a young man had been raised right, and he was almost never wrong. Men came to that lodge wanting in, wanting the standing and the brotherhood and the help it gave a family in hard times, and it was his job to read them. He did not ask about their money or their church. He watched how a man took his hat off, how he spoke to the oldest brother, what he did with his hands, whether he could be still. He had read young men for 30 years, and he said the raising always showed. A man could hide almost anything but the way he was brought up. And the one sign he trusted above every other, the plainest tell of all, is number 1 on this list. He was not rare. In every black neighborhood in the country there were men like him, the lodge master, the deacon, the old head on the corner, men who could read a stranger's whole upbringing in the first few minutes because they had been raised to and had spent a lifetime watching. It was never just manners, it was a language. And in the world these men were sent into, that language was also protection. The signs told other black folks instantly, this one is one of ours, this one was raised right, this one you can trust. They read it without thinking and passed it on the same way. We stopped teaching most of it. And a whole generation now walks into rooms unable to send the signal and unable to read it. Number 22 took less than 3 seconds, and it was the very first thing that old Lodge Master looked for. Number 9 contradicts what a young man today is taught about confidence, and yet it was one of the surest signs that somebody had raised a boy with care. And number 3, the sign that made the old man put a young stranger's name forward to the whole lodge on nothing but what he had seen, is the one this whole list was built around. It is where we end. Number 1. These were never about being fancy or performing for anybody. They were the quiet evidence that somewhere behind a man stood people who had loved him enough to teach him. In a world that was betting he had no such people at all. The world changed shape and we let these signs go quiet, not because they stopped meaning anything, but because we stopped handing them down. We are turning the sound back up. Every sign on this list, that lodge master could read at a glance. Hit that subscribe button, and let us count down the 25 lost signs a black man was raised right in the 1960s. Number 25, he took his hat off without being told. Crossing the threshold, the lodge, the house, the church, the hat came off on its own. No reminder, no delay. The lodge master watched the door. The hat off before a man was 3 steps in told him something true before a word. Cornelius Pate did it entering every hall in the Hill District, one clean motion held at the side. The reflex was the proof somebody had cared enough. Number 24, he greeted the oldest person first. Coming into any room, a raised right man found the eldest and went to them before anyone his own age. The lodge master noted exactly who a young man greeted first, because it told him whose voice the boy had grown up hearing. Julius Ford did it at every gathering in Greenwood, a hand offered to the oldest brother before he sat. Who he greeted first was a window straight back into the house that raised him. Number 23, he said the whole word. Not yeah, not uh-huh. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. Yes, Brother Coleman. The lodge master could hear the raising in a single answer, the mumble of a boy left to raise himself, or the clean word of a boy somebody had drilled with patience. Theodore Rand answered that way his whole life, on Sweet Auburn in Atlanta, past 60, and still saying sir to men younger than him. In one syllable, the whole household came through. Number 22. He looked you in the eye. The 3-second tell the old man looked for first. A young man who met his eyes, held them a warm beat, and did not drop them or overdo them. Amos Whitfield had that steady, unafraid, unhostile look in the Fillmore in San Francisco, and men trusted it before they knew why. It was the first thing the old man read. Number 21. He waited to be offered a seat. A raised right man did not drop into a chair in another man's space. He stood, easy, until a seat was named for him. Lemuel Banks stood in every lodge hall and parlor in Bronzeville until somebody said, "Sit." The man who took a seat unasked had never been taught whose house he was in. The one who waited had. It said, a family had taught a boy his place among his elders. Number 20. His shoes were shined. Whatever the suit cost, and most cost little, the shoes threw back the light. The lodge master glanced at a young man's feet, because a shine on a poor man's shoe meant somebody had taught him that care was free. Booker Cade shined his nightly on a Beale Street step in Memphis. A rundown heel told the old man there had been no one at home to say, "Before you leave this house, do your shoes." Number 19. He rose. When a woman entered, when a woman or an elder came into the room, a raised right man was on his feet before he thought about it. The lodge master saw who stood and who kept sitting, and he knew instantly which boys had grown up in a house where a woman was honored. Wendell Cruz rose so automatically in the Ville in St. Louis that he did it in his sleep. It was worn into a boy over years by people who made him do it until it became who he was. Number 18. He did not curse in front of elders. A young man might talk any way he pleased among his own, but in front of the old people and the women, his language was clean, and he never had to be reminded. The lodge master listened for the man who policed his own mouth without a look from anybody. Roosevelt Green kept it clean on Farish Street in Jackson his whole life, in mixed company. The clean mouth was proof a boy had been taught there were rooms that called for his best self. Number 17. He could be still. A raised right man could sit in a room without fidgeting, jingling, tapping, or needing to fill the quiet, comfortable in his own skin and in the silence. The lodge master watched the young man's hands and feet in the waiting because stillness told him a boy had been taught patience by someone with patience. Eldridge Powell could sit still and easy on a Central Avenue bench in Los Angeles for an hour. The still one had been raised by someone who stayed. Here is what worth sitting with. That whole language of signs used to be learned in rooms, the lodge, the barber shop, the porch, the church basement, where boys were around grown men often enough and long enough to absorb it without a single formal lesson. A boy caught how a man took his hat off by watching it done 10,000 times. Today, a young man can go weeks without sitting in a room full of grown men who owe him correction and care, and so he never catches the signs at all. Not because he is worse, but because the rooms that taught them have closed. We did not raise a worse generation. We tore down the schools of manhood and then blamed the men who graduated from nothing. The signs were never in the blood. They were in the rooms, and we let the rooms go. Number 16. He kept his word on small things. A raised right man was where he said he would be when he said and did the small thing he promised. The lodge master trusted a young man with something minor and watched whether it got done, because the boy who kept a small word had been raised by someone whose own word held. Nathaniel Sykes never broke a small promise in Detroit in his life. Big talk was cheap. The man who did the little thing he said had learned it at a table where a father's word meant something.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men who still believe a good name and quiet dignity carry weight, the way our fathers and grandfathers did. It's the Black Gentleman's Code, the forgotten rules black men once lived by. But this knowledge is disappearing. And once it's gone for good. So don't spend another year being the man people overlook. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link below. Go ahead. I'll be right here waiting.
Number 15. He introduced himself properly. Meeting a new man, a raised right man offered his hand, his whole name, and a word of where he was from. Not a mumble, not just a first name tossed off. Percy Van introduced himself full and clear at the Union Hall in Jackson Ward in Richmond, and men remembered him for it. The old lodge master could hear a whole upbringing in how a young man said his own name. The proper introduction was a family's fingerprint. Number 14. He handled money clean. A raised right man paid what he owed on time, did not borrow loose, and did not flash what little he had. The lodge master watched how a young man was around money because the boy who owed carefully and spent quietly had been taught by people who knew what debt could do to a family. Samuel Tate settled every account early in the Hill District. Loud money was insecurity. Clean money was character. And how a man carried $1 told the old man what kind of table he had eaten at. Number 13. He was gentle with children. A raised right man got down to a child's level, learned the child's name, and spoke to them like they counted. The lodge master watched a young man around the children underfoot at the hall because tenderness toward the small could not be faked and could not be taught late. Aaron Whitlow knew every child's name on a rondo block in St. Paul. It was one of the truest signs of all, and one of the quietest. Number 12. He listened more than he talked. A raised right man let his elders speak, did not interrupt, and asked more than he pronounced. The lodge master leaned toward the young man who came to listen, and away from the one who came to perform. Booker Reese would sit at the edge of a greenwood porch and take in an evening of men's talk without once cutting in. The boy who could be quiet had been raised around men worth listening to. The one who had to fill every silence had not. Number 11. He owned a mistake plainly. When a raised right man was wrong, he said so. No excuse, no shifting it, and made it right. The lodge master forgave almost any error a young man owned cleanly, and trusted almost no one who could not. Ezra Lamb would cross a room in Overtown, Miami, to say I was wrong before anyone made him. The old man knew which he faced at once. Number 10. He spoke well of his mother. Somewhere in the talk, how a young man spoke of the woman who raised him told the old man nearly everything. Not sentiment, respect, plain and unforced. Marcus Pendleton could not say his mother's name without his voice changing in Bronzeville. The lodge master listened for it, because a man who honored his mother had been loved by a woman worth honoring, and a man who spoke of her carelessly had a wound the lodge would have to reckon with. How he spoke of her was how he would speak of every woman after. Here is the part of his story we have been circling. That old lodge master was not born reading men. He came up in that same hall as a boy, sweeping the floor and setting the chairs, watching the old master greet each brother by name, weigh a stranger with a glance, and put his hand on a young man's shoulder to bring him in. He watched for years before anyone let him near the door. And the day the old master handed him the gavel and stepped back, the boy understood he was not being given a title. He was being handed a room, a code, and the trust of a whole community that had to be kept safe from the wrong men and open to the right ones. He would read young men at that door for 30 years, the way he had been read himself. And the one sign the old master taught him to trust first is still coming. It is number 1. Number 9, he did not brag. Everything tells a young man to sell himself, to lead with what he has done. The raised right man did the opposite. He let his work speak, and a man had to pull his accomplishments out of him. The lodge master trusted the quiet young man far more than the one announcing himself, because bragging was the sound of a boy who had never been told he was enough at home. Wilbert Stokes never once listed his own good deeds in the Fillmore. The man raised right assumed he would be seen because someone at home had always seen him. Number 8. He dressed with care, not flash. A raised right man was clean, pressed, and put together, not loud, not labeled, just cared for. The lodge master read the difference in a glance. The flashy young man was asking to be noticed. The well-kept one had simply been taught that you honor an occasion and yourself. Cleon Marsh pressed his one good shirt on U Street in Washington before every lodge night. It said someone had taught him that dignity costs attention, not money. Number 7. He remembered his manners at the table. Napkin down, elbows off, nobody eating before the eldest was served. A raised right man carried the table with him wherever he ate. The lodge master watched a young man at the fellowship supper because table manners were a whole childhood on display. Sylvester Boone ate like somebody had taught him, at every table in Deep Ellum, Dallas. The fork in his hand told the story of the home behind him. Number 6. He was good to people who could do nothing for him. The old man's favorite test, how a young stranger treated the janitor, the slow old brother, the child no one was watching. Wesley Frame was as warm to the man sweeping the lodge floor as to the Grand Master in Overtown, Miami. The lodge master watched who a young man was kind to when there was nothing in it, because that was the one thing pure raising produced and ambition never could. Kindness aimed at the powerless was character, and it could only have come from home. Number 5. He could take correction. When the old man told a raised right young man he was wrong, the young man said, "Thank you," and meant it. No sulk, no defense, no wounded pride. Garrett Hale took correction like a gift in the black bottom of Detroit, and grew from every word of it. The lodge master offered a small correction on purpose, just to watch, because the boy who could take it had been corrected with love at home. How a man received a hard word told the old man everything about the hands that raised him. Number 4. He knew how to sit with grief. When trouble came to the hall, a death, a sickness, a family broken, a raised right man knew to show up, sit quiet, and simply be present without needing to fix it or fill it. Clifton Rhodes never missed a wake in Greenwood and never said a foolish word at one. The lodge master watched who could sit steady beside another man's pain, because that composure was taught only in homes that had known grief and faced it with dignity. A man who could sit with sorrow had been raised by people who did not run from it. Number 3, somebody would vouch for him. This is the sign the whole list was built around. A raised right man came trailing people who would put their name behind him, an old deacon, a former teacher, a brother from another city who said he is a good one and look after him. The lodge master put a young stranger's name before the whole lodge on the strength of a vouch like that, because a man who had earned older people's word had been the kind of young man who honored it. Harvey Lincoln arrived in the Hill District on the vouch of men who trusted him, and the vouch bound him for life. The signs a man could show you were strong. The people who would vouch for him unasked were stronger. That was the raising, speaking through other mouths. Number 2, he carried himself the same when no one was watching. The deepest reading the old man ever did was of the young man who did not know he was being watched, how he treated the empty coat room, the unattended till, the drunk brother, Nobody was minding. Ezekiel Vaughn was the same man alone as in company in Overtown, Miami. The lodge master trusted only what a young man did unobserved, because performance could be learned in a week. But consistency was built over a childhood. There was no faking that. Number 1, you could tell he had been loved. The plainest sign on the list, and the one that old lodge master trusted above every other. Underneath the hat coming off and the shoes shined and the whole word spoken, there was a thing you could feel in a young man in the first minute, an ease, a steadiness, a way of being in the world that only comes from having been loved well by somebody early. It was the first thing the old master taught him to look for, and the last thing he was still reading in young men 50 years on. Every other sign on this list was just a way that one thing showed itself, that somewhere behind this man stood people who had held him, corrected him, and believed he was worth raising. Because here is what the old man knew that no test could measure. You cannot fake having been loved, and you cannot hide it either. He had been raised right because he had been raised loved. That was the whole of it. None of these signs required money, schooling, or a name anybody knew. They required only that somewhere behind a young man there had been people, a mother, a father, an old head, a lodge full of men, who cared enough to teach him over years, in 100 small corrections, who he was going to be. The men who read those signs at the door understood something this country has spent a long time trying to make us forget. That a man raised right is not born but built, slowly, by people who love him, in rooms that no longer stand the way they did. These were men who guarded those rooms, read the young, and brought the right ones in. The lodges have gone quiet, and the porches have emptied. But the signs are not complicated, and they are not lost forever. Somewhere, an old man is still watching a young one take his hat off at a door and thinking, somebody raised that boy right.